What would you like to see change in your life? And what is the biggest obstacle that you're facing now? I run 2 programs called Inner Knowing and Good Life Designed for serious individuals who are ready to take the next step in their personal and professional lives. I will personally be coaching a small group of individuals on tools and frameworks for creating an intuitive practice and for creating self-mastery in their life. As someone who's helped countless entrepreneurs open doors of possibility that they never thought existed, I've seen these strategies transform people's lives. The best part is that you'll 10x your output, unlock your creative genius. I'll work with you weekly to overcome your limiting beliefs. I'll teach you how to create clarity, processes, develop your intuition, and set a new framework on how to live your best life. And you'll get access to guided meditations that I have personally created that are not available anywhere else. We'll create a new self-concept that you can practice moving forward. This method is so effective that even if you don't have a lot of time or if you think you're not ready for a change, these frameworks and methodologies will still work for you. You can check out the link in the show notes to join the waiting list, and you can also check out what some of the previous clients had to say about our time together. It's first come, first serve, and I hope to see you there. Hi, my name is Yasmin Tarehi, and this is Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. On today's episode, I speak with Lisa Wimberger, who is the founder of the Neurosculpting Institute and the co-founder of the NeuroPraxis App. She holds a master's degree in education, a foundation certificate in NeuroLeadership, and a certificates in Medical Neuroscience, visual perception, and the brain and neurobiology. She's the author of 7 books on neuroplasticity and stress management, including New Beliefs, New Brain, Free Yourself from Stress and Fear, and Neurosculpting, a whole brain approach to heal trauma, rewrite limiting beliefs, and find wholeness. She began her meditation practice at age 12, and she's got over 60 international franchises, runs multiple companies. I'm so excited to welcome Lisa to the show. I actually saw her talk in action at a conference a couple months ago and was really moved by her methodology. So welcome to the show, Lisa.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Yasmin. It's we had such great conversation at that conference that I was just so excited to talk to you again.
Yes, definitely. So Lisa, to kick it off, can you tell us what is neuroplasticity and, why do so many people experience these like fight or freeze symptoms when they're under a lot of stress?
Yeah. So neuroplasticity is the term that science uses to describe a state of learning in the brain and the nervous system. So anytime the nervous system is paying attention to something and committing it to memory and then referencing it again later, that's learning, right? So we learn how to move, we learn how to walk and talk, we learn how to replicate trauma and stress patterns, and we learn how to move out of them. And all of that are states of neuroplasticity. So instead of thinking about the brain as a fixed thing, we think about it as plastic, meaning moldable and never really taking the same shape. So instead of elastic that returns to the same shape, the brain is considered plastic because it's shaping itself based on our life's experiences, our thoughts, our perceptions. And this is true not just for the brain in our skull, but for the entire central nervous system, which includes the spinal column and the way the nerves talk to the muscles and the organs of the body. So you can consider the entire body in a state of learning that sometimes is very heightened, and you're very receptive to learning a pattern or replicating a pattern. And sometimes we're not so receptive, in which case we're not very neuroplastic. And life influences these different states, our diet, our relationships, our thoughts. And so why it's so easy to get stuck in a stress response like a fight, flee, or even freeze is because these responses are self-protective. And the most important thing to the survival of our species is self-protection. So when we engage in self-protection, whether it's self-protection from something the environment has for us, something dangerous in the environment, or whether it's self-protection against a perception or an assumption, right? We can go into self-protection mode when we're assuming something bad's going to happen. The brain doesn't know the difference between what's really happening and what is perception, and it moves into self-protection, and the nervous system pays attention. And it says, our self-protection patterns have been accessed. These are our most primal, life-saving patterns. This must be important. And it values that self-protection moment as highly important and worth remembering. And so we store that in the body, and it gets easier and easier to access that remembered self-protection pattern even when we're not really in danger. And it's all because the nervous system is neuroplastically learning.
So a lot to unpack from that. And I'm really curious, how you can shift out of this state of remembrance and learning, especially when it's not serving you. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
That is the golden question, right? This is the thing we're all searching for. We're all searching for an intentional way to evolve to our best self. And generally, when we think of that journey and that purpose and that mission on the planet, we're not thinking we'd like to keep our stress responses dominant. We often think, I kind of want to get past these, and I only want to use them when in real danger. And so neuroplasticity does not really discern. It just offers us the opportunity to learn. So that means with practice, tools, the right approach, and the right intention, you can use your perception and your behaviors to create learning moments for your brain and your nervous system, the very same way self-protection responses create learning for your brain and nervous system. We use the same process, and we just use it intentionally. Our stress responses are often subconscious and default, so they're unintentional. Well, you can add intention into the system. First, you have to learn and know the system, which is why it's so important to learn about the nervous system and how it works. And then you layer intention into that, and now what you actually have is a self-directed moment of heightened learning in the brain and the nervous system. And then you can sort of direct it to focus and learn anything you want it to. And there's lots of techniques for that, but it really starts with, to every single one of you listening right now, it starts with this. You are in a body. That body requires a set of conditions to be met in order for it to relax, feel safe, calm down, and learn something new. And unless and until you know that language, you're going to be unintentional, and you're going to feel sometimes like life beats you up. But when you know the mechanisms of the nervous system and you can apply specific intention and practices, you start to feel empowered even when life is unfair. And believe me, I understand life is unfair. More unfair for various populations, and that is the truth of life, the sad truth of life. But the empowering truth is that neuroplasticity can change your response to all of that, and it's really a set of practices and some education and really simple, strategic kinds of meditations.
Amazing. Yeah. And I want to go into the 5-step process for neurosculpting, which is a term I believe that you coined. Can you talk to us about this 5-step process and how we can apply it in our day-to-day life?
Yeah. So we teach this 5 steps inside the container of meditation. So we will teach a very regimented 15 to 20 minute meditation practice. We guide it, and embedded in this practice are 5 steps that the user, the listener, doesn't really notice, right? It's the guidance of it that is adhering to the 5 steps. But the receiver's just listening to a really fun story. But here's what's happening in that story. We are getting your brain and your nervous system very receptive. Not entirely unlike hypnosis, but this is not hypnosis. So the first step we do is we spend 3 or so minutes helping your midbrain dial down a little bit. So we start to soften your resistance. And this is very simply done by asking you to focus on very consistent, predictable, supportive things that make you comfortable. We know that there is a measurable decrease in stress response centers of the brain when we are orienting ourselves to a comfortable environment. So we just spend 3 minutes marinating in that. And what that does is it starts to dial down activity in the midbrain. The next thing we want to do is really juice up focused attention. This is very different than other meditations where you clear your mind. We are not clearing the mind. And some of you are saying, yay. I'm saying, yay. We're not clearing the mind. We're actually anchoring you into focused attention while you are relaxed. That is an amazing combination. That is the combination gold standard for very receptive learning. If you can be relaxed and focused, that's gold. So in order to get you focused after the first 3 minutes of relaxation and comfort, we activate your prefrontal cortex. And we do that. That's the front of the brain. And we do that very simply by giving the front of the brain all the things it gets very excited about. It gets very excited to think about silly, ridiculous, humorous thoughts. It gets very activated when it has to think about curiosity and wonder and amazement. So for the, I would say, minutes like 4 through 6 of the meditation, we're asking you to think of really silly things that mean absolutely nothing. But we're really recruiting focused attention in the front of the brain. So I may ask the listener to think about what a cloud might taste like if it were a flavor of ice cream. And the front of the brain is going to get very aroused by this curious thought. So after about 6 minutes of orienting to comfort and thinking fun, silly thoughts, your brain is actually induced. It's induced to a very specific condition, the condition of heightened learning. This is exactly what we want. It's a primer. So what does the brain prime itself for? Well, it primes itself to learn a new pattern or unlearn an old pattern. And because it is conditioned and primed in just 6 minutes or less, it's ready. It's ready to engage in discovery in a way that helps you calmly find a limiting or stressful pattern and unwind it, or excitedly create a brand new pattern you'd like to embed into your memory. And we do that in a very specific, playful way. This is step 3. So this is minutes, let's say 7 through, 14, 15, right? And in these 7 or so minutes, we're just telling you a story. And we're telling you a story so that both sides of your brain get very engaged in a bilateral experience. So in order to do that, I'm going to spell words. I'm going to ask you to think of lists. I might say numbers so that your logical, literal-minded part of your brain gets engaged. And then I'm going to invite you to think of colors and textures and abstract symbols to get your very symbolic side of the brain engaged. So in this way, As I tell you the story of your STRESS, I may ask you to list a few words that describe that STRESS. And then I may ask you to imagine if that stress were a particular color or shape, what could that be? And so really what I'm doing is I've primed your brain. Well, actually, you've primed your brain. And now you're discovering a relationship to your stress that is bilaterally engaged. And that's very important because a bilateral stimulation, number one, keeps us recruiting more of the brain. So the brain is starting to value this discovery as very important. Number two, it keeps you from falling into a reliving of that stress. We don't want to relive it. We don't want to rehash it. We don't want to reinforce it. And the only way to do that is to make sure we are toggling back and forth across the midline of the brain, experiencing it in a way we've never experienced it before, so it can't possibly be relived. And in this way, neurosculpting does its best job at keeping you out of your trauma and stress while allowing the nervous system to look at it from as far or as close as is comfortable for you. And then in steps 4 and 5, we invite a body awareness. We do a body scan, and you get to experience where your body is responding to these colors, these words, these textures. And we use your prefrontal cortex, creative mind, once again, to imagine something playful and comfortable that you can do with those colors or textures to minimize them. And then we use breath to anchor you into your body. And once your body perceives a shift, even if you don't feel one, if your mind perceives one, that is a new imprint, a new pattern, so to speak. And so we have you anchor into that with a hand gesture and then a word. So steps 4 and 5 are somatic and linguistic. So what we've done in a 20-minute time frame is we've primed the brain. We've gently escorted you into your nervous system to renegotiate a pattern that's been with you for a long time. We do it safely. We do it at your comfort level. And then you anchor into the edit or the shift so that the thing you remember is that you've shifted it, so that the next time this pattern comes up, it's slightly shifted. It's not volume 10, it's volume 9.5. And then the next time you shift it and this pattern comes up, it's not a 9.5, it's a 9. And so over time, you incrementally change the relationship to the pattern. And it sounds complicated sometimes when I explain it, but it is the most laser-targeted, efficient system I have experienced. Now, of course, I haven't experienced everything, but I've experienced a lot of modalities to try to get me out of my trauma, and nothing, absolutely nothing has worked for me like this process. And it was a process I had to create because nothing worked and I was dying.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to go back to a couple of things you said, Lisa. So you talked about bilateral movement. We have about 70 plus countries listening into the show. So I just want to make sure people understand some of the language that you're using. Can you tell folks what that means, the bilateral movement?
So the brain has two sides. It has a left side and a right side. They are independent. They are connected by cabling. And they talk to each other. And generally, they do similar things, but they are two independent brains, so to speak. So when we lateralize, meaning when we use one side more dominantly, we tend to start to view the world in a very imbalanced way, right? So we could be the kind of people that view the world only logically, and we leave no room for symbolism and intuition, right? That can feel imbalanced. Or we can be the other way. We can view the world very metaphorically and symbolically and ignore logic. that's not balanced either. So when we cross the midline of the brain and we activate both left and right side, we are getting more of the brain involved in a more holistic way. If you think about the body, it's the same thing. You must cross the midline of the body to be balanced. So if you were to be walking right now, your left foot goes forward, but your right shoulder slightly comes forward in an opposite balancing manner. It's the same in running. It's the same in sports and dance. There is always the opposite side there to counterbalance. And with the brain, if we use the opposite side to balance and we go back and forth, we are creating efficiencies, safety, balance, and more brain real estate, which means everything's value gets heightened. And so it's a great way to add value and balance to the thought process, the meditation process, to the physical process, and to the process of moving and dancing and playing sports and all of these things.
Got it. Amazing. Okay, cool. So, and what about, why do so many other practices get this wrong? You speak about this being a very specific process to really calm down the nervous system, and how not, all meditation, for example, is applicable to every single person, since we all have very different responses.
Yes.
So yeah, can you talk to us about like what so many other practices get wrong?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yes. I have very specific thoughts. Okay. So most of us would agree that meditation, the word and the concept, is positioned as a way to calm down. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So that's beautiful, but that is only necessary when the body is too aroused. And so there are 3 stress responses, right? Fight, flee, which represents arousal. In those cases, sure, relaxation meditation is amazing. Mindfulness is amazing. You should relax because you're too aroused. But we also can freeze. And all humans have this option. And many of us default to freeze. Well, freeze is not arousal in the body. Freeze is the extreme dampening of arousal. Freeze in the body as a stress response drops the heart rate, contracts the muscles, deprives the brain of oxygen, and can kill you. This was my seizure syndrome was extreme freeze. In a case where your patterns push you inward towards freeze, the last thing you should do is try to calm down. And I say that with so much passion because I want you, the listener, to hear me say, if you are someone who goes into withdraw and freeze, you do not want to calm down. It is detrimental. You need to arouse the body to come back to baseline. So when we lump meditation as a healing modality into this blanket statement of it helps you calm down, well, some of us don't need to calm down. Some of us will die if we calm down any further. We'll go into dissociation, we'll go into bradycardia, and we will die. And I'm being extreme right now, but because I'm speaking from experience, this was me. I've been meditating since I was 12. I'm 53. Most of those years was with relaxation meditations, metaphysical meditations, and transcendental meditation. And all of them were designed to calm me down. And I was dying. My seizures were getting worse. They were putting me into cardiac arrest. I was flatlining. I was being resuscitated. And it wasn't until I learned the language of my nervous system and realized, oh my goodness, I've been using the wrong kind of meditation for what my body's set of conditions was begging for. It was begging for arousal so that my heart could beat faster because it needed to, so that my brain could oxygenate. And this is my soapbox, my little speech around this, right? You have to use the right tool for the right job. When you're aroused, yes, go reach for relaxation meditation. When you are paralyzed in freeze, or you're acting like you're dissociated or withdrawn or you're numb, you should not be relaxing.
So powerful. And this is something that I've never heard before. And when I heard you speak about this at the conference, I was just really moved by it because, for people that are frozen, I think that's usually the go-to is to go meditate and become even more relaxed, which is not what people who freeze need.
No, and the other thing about people who freeze, and I can't speak for everyone who freezes, but I'll speak for myself. When I would freeze, it's like endorphins, it's like anesthesia, it's like numbing, it's like a desensitizing drug almost. And I could dissociate very well. So I had a very high pain tolerance because I could dissociate from pain. So I could tolerate a lot. I could stay looking calm all the time, not because I was calm, but because I was so dissociated that I couldn't feel. And when you can't feel, you can't express. So people who withdraw and freeze, they look calm, they remain quiet, they remain what seems like they're grounded, but doesn't feel like that on the inside, and they start to go numb. What's actually physically happening is that their heart rate is decelerating, and they're starting to dissociate because their brain is being deprived of oxygen. So now you can hear people, but you're not really understanding them, or you're not even caring or motivated enough to respond. You go into this almost like you're in a bubble, and the rest of the world is outside of you. And this is a fantastic thing when your body's in real pain. This is what animals do when they get caught by the tiger. They activate this endorphin freeze response so they don't feel their death. And we do this as humans. So we get into these spaces, and the way back home to health is to start to feel the body again, to arouse the body into its felt sense. And that means the heart rate has to come back up, the brain has to come back online, and the awareness has to stop dissociating. And you layer a meditation that says, why don't you just float away from your body and pretend it doesn't exist? You give one of those to someone really good at freeze. For me, that was like asking me to do what I already did really well and giving me permission to continue to dissociate and call it something noble, like, well, I'm meditating. Well, no, I was just continuing to dissociate. I do use relaxation meditation when I'm aroused because sometimes my body is too agitated, but it's not my default. My default is I need neurosculpting because I go freeze much easier than I go into arousal.
And what can someone do for arousal during the day? Like, let's say they're at work.
There's so many things that you can do. I like to give things that work for both arousal and freeze so that you don't really have to think about it too much. So this is my little toolbox right now I'm going to share with you. When you are either too agitated or too frozen, you are going to experience contraction in the muscles, right? It's going to feel different. In one, it's going to feel like you've got your foot on the brake of the car and your foot on the gas, and you've got that really alive, contracted feeling. That's arousal. When you're frozen, you can feel immobilized and paralyzed. That's a different kind of contraction. But either way, your muscles are playing the game. And so the fastest way to bring yourself back to baseline, no matter where you are in that spectrum, is to soften the muscles. And the fastest way I know how to do that is to shake my body wildly. Now, you mentioned being at work. Well, you might not want to do this at work in the conference room, but you can go to the bathroom and close the door and shake for 30 seconds wildly, uncontrollably. So it's not a pretty kind of shaking. It's a twitch. It's a wave that moves over your body. And you start this process and you do it for 30 seconds. And what you may feel after just 30 seconds is that you can exhale. If you're too aroused, you start to exhale. If you're frozen, you suddenly start to feel your body on the ground. It brings you back to baseline. And this is technically called neurogenic tremoring. And it's a gift of regulation that all mammal bodies have access to. Humans forget to do this because it looks silly or it's awkward. Animals don't forget. The dog will go twitch and shake when it's got too much fear running through its system. It will shake out the contraction in the muscles because once the muscles are soft, they send a signal back through the nerve, through the peripheral nerves, back through the spinal column up to the brain, and soft muscles say to the brain, "Hey, we're good. Danger is gone. We're soft." And the brain regulates itself. So this is my go-to 30-second intervention, and I do this as many times a day as I need to. It's a reset, and it's not a metaphor. It is a literal nervous system regulation protocol.
And do you do this every single day, Lisa?
Mm-hmm. I will shake just even when I think I don't need it. I shake because I can feel my body moving back to homeostasis from wherever it might have been. And it just feels so, it's a combination of embodied and alive, but soft, calm, and rested. That's what I feel when I do it. And yes, I do it every single day.
I love that. Amazing. So great. So why is emotional regulation so important?
Well, because the emotional pain path and the physical pain path in the brain overlaps, and often we don't know the difference. So if you don't have emotional regulation, then you do not have physical regulation, and vice versa. You know this by your own personal experience. When I say you, I mean every single one of you listening. You know when your body is hurt, your emotional well-being suffers. You're less forgiving. You're more agitated. You may even spiral into depression. Nothing has happened to your brain. Your pinky's broken, or you hurt your leg, or you have a stomach virus. Either way, when your physical body is dysregulated, your emotions dysregulate. The reverse is true. So I look at emotions as one side of the spectrum. The physical body is the other side, and it's one spectrum. So without emotional regulation, you're going to work harder to have a healthy body. And without healthy lifestyle for your body, you're going to work harder to be emotionally regulated. So I don't separate it from physical well-being, and you have to come at the body systemically as an entire organism to get the most efficient, long-lasting change. And if I keep everything separated, emotions are one thing, physical health is another thing, thoughts are yet another thing, spirituality is another thing. If I view it like that, I would still be chasing a cure for my seizures. But the moment I started viewing my body as an organism made of integrated systems and stopped separating and siloing out head versus heart, emotions versus physicality, and started listening to how those things talk to each other, I started healing. And the neurosculpting practice takes all of that into account. So Yeah, emotional regulation is going to speed up your recovery from any physical disease you have. And emotional dysregulation will keep you sick longer. And that's just the way it is.
Wow. Wow, fascinating. So, Lisa, I want to talk about your journey. You alluded to it a little bit about your seizures, but can you tell us what attracted you to the space, and can you talk to us about your own experience?
Yeah. So I had a traumatic incident on my birthday when I was 15. I always used the freeze response as my go-to, but it was normal freeze, like most people have. Well, at 15, I was hit by lightning, and my vagus nerve, which runs the length of the spinal column and pretty much lives in the brainstem, that nerve, which controls the freeze response, was just hyperactive after I was hit in the base of the spine by lightning. So I just fried my whole system. I started having seizures about a week after I was hit, and the seizures progressed. So by the time I was in my 20s, I was flatlining. It was determined that I was not epileptic. They didn't give me a diagnosis till my 30s. The diagnosis now would be vasovagal anoxic seizure disorder. And what that means is my freeze response was going haywire. So my stress response to the world was not controlled. It was out of control. Therefore, I was starting to freeze and go into self-protection at any and all stress environments. And my vagus nerve was dropping my heart rate so fast that my heart would stop. And then my brain would shut off, and then I would drop to the ground unconscious, and then I would go cyanotic, so I would turn blue and rigid, and your heart kicks back in after, anywhere from, generally it's supposed to kick back in after 15, 20 seconds. But the more I was having seizures, by the time I was in my 30s, it wasn't doing that. I was out sometimes for minutes. I mean, I flatlined in a doctor's office, and I was out long enough for them to go into the next room and get a needle of atropine, and they were going to resuscitate me with atropine, which is very jarring. It's like a jolt to the heart. So I was not calibrating back to a beating heart and a functioning brain very well anymore. And by the time I was in my late 30s, I had to be resuscitated many times. And that was non-negotiable anymore, because at the time I had a little daughter. I traumatized her incredibly by when she was 3, she watched me flatline in a food court. She watched me be resuscitated, and it damaged us. And the seizures were continuing, and I thought, I'm going to die, and she's 3, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do about this other than I have to fix it. And so I had been studying neuroscience for a couple years at that point to try to get a handle on these seizures. And it got to critical mass, and I figured out that this stress response pattern, since it wasn't epilepsy, then I could intervene and maybe unwind this pattern and re-entrain to a new pattern, a new stress response. Why not? I mean, I've got fight, flee available to me. Why do I keep freezing like this? So I actually backwards engineered my decades of meditation practice, and I said, what is meditation missing here? Why is it not healing me? And that's when I realized, because it kept trying to calm me down. So I stripped my meditation practice, and I created this 5-step protocol for myself. And my goal was that I would do this entrainment meditation so often that I would train myself to have a different response to stress. So I did the steps, like I just told you. I marinated my midbrain in comfort. I activated my prefrontal cortex in funny, silly things. And then I told a story with bilateral stimulation. And the story was, Next time I have a seizure coming and I could feel it and I have just a couple seconds to feel it, I practiced kicking, punching, screaming, biting in my meditation. So I was literally, there's a siren going by, how ironic. So I was literally in step 3 of the meditation, going through a rehearsal script while my brain was focused and learning that script. And so I practiced that every day for months, not knowing when another seizure would come and knowing that I don't know if this is going to work. I just know that I was pretty dead last time, and next time I'll be really dead. And so about 7 months later, another seizure came while I was driving the car. I don't recall driving. I thought I was the passenger. My husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, said I was driving. So I don't have accurate recollection there. And the seizure halo came, which is like that window of just a few seconds where you know you're going to seize. And my script kicked in on autopilot. I kicked, punched, screamed, and bit without knowing I was doing it. I had rehearsed it so well that my body reached for it. And guess what? My body reached for fight, flee instead of freeze. And what that resulted in was my heart staying elevated, my brain staying oxygenated. And I did not seize. Instead, I had a lifetime of trauma come out. Like I started having memories, which is a whole other story. But suffice to say, I overrode a learned autonomic pattern. And I overrode it in a way that kept me healthy. And I only could have done that because I studied what the nervous system needs and how to give it to my nervous system. I would be dead if I didn't. My daughter would have lost me at age 5 because the last seizure I ever had, no, she would have lost me at 4, was when she was 4. I had 3 that year and they took me out, and the last one did it for me. I had a fire of motivation. I was desperate. And when you're backed into a corner and the stakes are high enough, you can figure out anything.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. I mean, I don't think I've heard of many people who have moved out of this like autonomic response to even like a trigger. That's really powerful, Lisa.
Well, the amazing thing is that in the last 16 years, I have a number of clients who no longer have seizures with the exact same process.
Wow.
And so I can't claim it's a cure for anything because I'm not a medical doctor. But what I can say is that if you talk to my clients who came to me with seizures, who replicated my process, and they don't have seizures anymore, they will tell you it saved their lives.
Wow. Amazing. It's just amazing, Lisa. I'm so happy that you discovered this process and have shared it with others.
Me too.
Lisa, can you talk to us a little bit about your work with first responders and veterans and some of the ways that you have seen them transform?
Yeah, that's a whole interesting journey. So right after I broke through my seizure and I knew they were gone for good, I sort of made a deal with whatever higher force you believe in, right? You can call it whatever you want. I made a deal with my creator. And that deal was, this process saved my life. I am now in service to it, and I will share it with those who need it to help them save their lives. And that was my mission. And I quit my job. I was a project manager at a very large consulting firm. And I quit my job and said, I need to teach this. And interestingly, around the same time, I have officers in my extended family, and they were a mess. They were the stereotype of the ugly kind of officer that you think of, you know, the officer that goes out and drinks too much and it profiles people and is abusive, right? This was literally the person in my family. And he had these beautiful children, my cousins, and they were just beautiful children, and they were clinically depressed as kids and experiencing PTSD. And I thought, I have this process that can help someone out of their trauma patterns. And I'm using it with my little cousins. But if I could have used it with the father, I wouldn't have to have used it now with the children. So could I go to a very rich source of pain and help people who are stuck in these patterns so that the rest of the world benefits too? And my brain went to cops. And at the time, I did not have a positive association with cops. I had my personal association. But I went into my first agency. This was back in 2007. And I taught a room of, the first time I ever taught them was a room of 30 officers. I taught them these techniques because my thought was this: these people cannot regulate their emotions. They're stuck in trauma patterns, and they hold loaded guns. Mm-hmm. And they have their finger on the trigger of loaded guns. If ever there was a person that needed the most emotional regulation, it's someone holding a weapon. And I thought, if I could help humanize an officer so that they are an embodied, regulated being, maybe I could save lives. And so that was my mission. And after the first class and the first few meditations, and believe me, at that time, officers were not receptive to meditation. I couldn't even say the word, so I didn't. But after class, a number of them came to me crying and said, where were these techniques when I shot that person? Where were these techniques when my fellow officer committed suicide because he beat his wife when he was drunk? And I'm being totally honest. They were broken people. Not all of them, but the ones who came to me afterwards were broken. And now they were broken open and seeing a light at the end of the tunnel for how to get out of their habituated patterns. And that was the start of over a decade of working with officers and those in deep levels of PTSD, especially the ones who carried weapons, like, returning veterans or cops. You can't expect a nervous system to do something healthy with compound stress and trauma if you haven't taught it how to do something healthy with that. And that's what we do with officers, right? We expect them to be noble, good, grounded, and regulated. But if you look at the budgets of police departments, the budget's used for tactical training and weapons training. It is not used for emotional regulation. And so we have an expectation that is never met. And then we have officers who might start their career with the most noble of intentions to serve and protect. And in a very short time, with unmanageable levels of exposure to stress, showing up to homicide calls, showing up, working in crimes against children department will destroy the best of the best. You may feel really regulated right now. You may feel like you could even judge. But I promise you, if every day you saw horrific crimes against children, you might start to be a little bit jaded around human behavior. And you may start to get dysregulated. And these are the officers I worked with. And it was fascinating to me. I never thought I was going to work with cops, but it was a need. And I promised my creator I was in service to this, and it would take me where it needed to go, and it needed to go there. And that's where I went.
Wow. Thank you for sharing, Lisa. That's really, really powerful. Wow. I am curious, looking back on this journey that you've been on, really, it's been a journey. What sort of things have surprised you the most?
What has surprised me the most is that doing this sort of internal work and self-regulation work has enriched my relationships 10,000 times, right? So it's this weird put your oxygen mask on first moment where growing up, I always put other people first. I was taught to be a healer, right? Not in those exact words, but I was taught to serve and be a healer. It was my natural inclination. I loved to listen to people's problems. I loved to help them through their problems. But I never addressed mine, because to address my own felt selfish to me. When other people needed me, how could I possibly say I needed to spend me time? It just felt really selfish to me. And finally going in to do the work of self-regulation helped me see that that gifted my daughter a mother who was alive. Like it became very clear to me, it is not selfish to regulate yourself, to take the time to give the care and attention to your body that you live in, that is the thing that touches other people, the mouth that speaks to other people, the eyes that look at other people. This is all in service to the world for you to do the self-cleanup, the self-regulation, the self-balancing, the self-compassion, the self-love. And I couldn't get there until I stopped viewing it as selfish and started viewing it as necessary. And so that's the most surprising thing, is that it helped me love better. It helped me laugh more. It helped me want to forgive people. It helped me admit my mistakes. It helps me accept that I will make more mistakes, and that's just what humans do, and that at that point in time, I'll learn to love myself again. And all of this came once I got past this idea that self-care is selfish.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Amen to that. Like to give from a full cup rather than a half cup, for sure. I think that's something we're all learning. So, Lisa, what do you want to tell our listeners about their health, wellness, and well-being? What's your main takeaway?
I would want you to take away an emotional nugget that you could replay in your head when things are really dark. Because you can get the tools anywhere. You can go to my website and get the tools. I want you to hold this thought. No matter how dark it is, no matter how badly you feel you have messed up or not measured up or hurt somebody or yourself, I want to tell you, you're not broken. And I know you're not broken because your brain is neuroplastic, which means with just a little work, it can create an entirely new set of patterns that become behaviors, that become beliefs about yourself. And you can reface yourself in a very short amount of time, so that when you look in the mirror, you see the person you want to see. You are never broken. If there's a brain in your head, you are not broken.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And where can people learn more about you? Are there any resources or a website that you can point folks to?
Yeah, neurosculpting.com. Lots of information, amazing online courses, amazing tools and resources. And then Instagram at Neurosculpting. Lots of really fun exercises and great content. And you can reach me through either of those channels.
Amazing. Okay, great. We'll leave the link to your website in the show notes. And of course, people can purchase your books on Amazon and wherever they're sold. So thank you so much for your time, Lisa. This was so wonderful. I think a lot of people are going to benefit from this practice tremendously because I think a lot of people have dysregulated nervous systems, especially coming out of the pandemic.
Absolutely. And it was so great to talk to you, Yasmin.
Oh, thank you so much. For our audience, thanks for joining and for listening. In this episode, we learned about neuroplasticity with Lisa Wimberger. And you can tune in to Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. Thanks again.